The first time I saw a grown attorney go completely silent, it wasn't in front of a judge. It was in a hallway outside courtroom 3B, when a man in a $1,200 suit read one line on a motion and blinked like his brain just tripped over a curb.
If you've ever been dragged into financial disclosure like it's a moral trial, you already know the playbook. Accuse first, demand everything, and hope fear does the rest. But when someone doesn't panic, when they hand over exactly what you asked for with a straight face, that's when the room gets cold. Subscribe if you want the kind of stories where the quiet guy doesn't win by shouting. He wins by thinking 3 years ahead.
I'm not the husband in this story. I'm the one people call when they want a clean retelling without the messy hero worship. I'm the friend who sat in the back pew of that courtroom. The guy who watched the wife rehearse her wounded face in the reflection of her phone screen. The guy who noticed her lawyer, Mr. Mallory, kept patting his briefcase like it was a loaded weapon. Civil divorce. That's what they tell you it is at first. 2 adults, a mediator, a list of assets. Will be fair. Then the temperature changes. The moment it became adversarial was the moment she stopped saying we and started saying my money, my sacrifices, my future. Like the years she spent living in a house he paid for were a volunteer project. His name is Daniel, mid-40s. The kind of man you'd overlook in a grocery store aisle because he doesn't broadcast. No flashy watch, no loud laugh. Work boots sometimes, even when he's not working. Not because he can't afford nicer, because he doesn't need the costume. She was Marissa. Same age range, different energy. Everything curated. Hair done for a court date, like she was going to a bridal shower. She had this practiced quiver in her voice when she said his name, like it hurt to pronounce it. And every time she glanced at him, it wasn't grief. It was calculation. How much can I still take? Mallory made sure the first punch landed in public. He stood and addressed the judge like he was doing the court a favor by existing. Your Honor, he said, we have reason to believe the respondent is concealing assets. We request full financial disclosure. All accounts, statements, business records, trusts, entities, everything. He said everything the way men say checkmate. Marissa's mouth tightened into something that looked like sadness if you didn't know better. She avoided Daniel's eyes, as if she were the victim of his imagined greed. When Mallory sat down, he gave her a little nod, barely a twitch, but it was the nod of a man who thinks the other side is about to bleed out. The judge looked over his glasses at Daniel. Sir, do you understand what's being requested? Daniel didn't fidget, didn't perform outrage. He didn't even look at Marissa, which I think was the first crack in her confidence. People like her feed on reaction. No reaction is starvation. Yes, Your Honor, he said, calm, like he was confirming the weather. I can provide access today. Mallory's eyebrows lifted. Access, he repeated, half amused. We need records. Not whatever that means. Daniel reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small black card. Not a business card. Thicker. Matte. No logo. Just a string of characters printed in clean white font and, underneath it, a QR code. The kind you see on serious hardware. He handed it to his own attorney, who looked surprised for a fraction of a second, like she'd seen it before but didn't expect him to use it here. Daniel's attorney stepped forward and presented it to the clerk, who handed it to the judge. The judge studied it, then looked up. This is login information? It's a vault, Daniel said. Encrypted archive. All records requested are stored there. Categorized by year and entity. Read-only access. Audit trails are enabled. Anything downloaded is logged. The word audit made Mallory sit up straighter. Marissa's head snapped toward Daniel for the first time. She mouthed something that I couldn't hear, but I read lips well enough to catch it. What is that? Daniel didn't answer her. That was his cruelty. Quiet, surgical. He answered the judge. It includes personal accounts, business accounts, tax filings, distributions, and statements from third-party auditors. Mallory let out a small chuckle, the kind men do when they're trying to make confidence contagious. Your Honor, we'd prefer hard copies. We have no way of verifying some private vault. He could upload anything. Daniel's attorney didn't flinch. Your Honor, the vault contains original source documents, bank-generated PDFs with embedded verification and audit letters. Access will allow opposing counsel to retrieve everything they requested faster than paper. The judge's patience thinned. Counselor, you demanded full disclosure. The respondent is offering it immediately. Unless you have a legal basis to refuse access, I'm ordering you to accept. Mallory's smile turned brittle. Of course, Your Honor. We will review. But here's what I saw, sitting in the back, the first flicker. Not fear yet. Confusion. It flashed across Mallory's face when he realized Daniel wasn't stalling. He wasn't scrambling. He wasn't bargaining. He was giving. Marissa leaned toward her lawyer, whispering fast. Mallory didn't look at her. He stared at that black card like it had teeth. Court wrapped with procedural noise. Dates set. Orders signed. People stood, gathered papers, pretended this was normal. Daniel walked out without touching Marissa, without giving her the satisfaction of an argument. His shoulders didn't slump. He didn't do the wounded man routine. He just moved like someone leaving a meeting that went exactly as expected. In the hallway, Marissa caught up to him, heels clicking, voice sharpened with poison wrapped in perfume. You think you're so clever, she hissed. You're just paranoid. It's all your work, your little secrets. You're going to regret trying to make me look stupid. Daniel finally looked at her, just once. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder. I'm not trying to make you look anything, he said. You handle that part just fine. She opened her mouth, ready to spit something dramatic, but Mallory appeared beside her like a handler. Marissa, he said softly, pulling her back by the elbow. Let's go. He wasn't calming her down for her benefit. He was protecting his own timeline. Because Mallory's plan was simple. Get back to his office, log in, find the hidden money, and use it like a crowbar. That afternoon, he did exactly that. I know because Daniel told me later, without bragging, without flourish, that the vault was designed to record every failed attempt, every wrong password, every screenshot, every export. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a fact, like describing a smoke detector. So Mallory went to his sleek office with the glass walls and the framed diplomas and the espresso machine that whistled like it was part of the brand. He sat at his desk. He typed the credentials. He expected a checking account, a brokerage, maybe a hidden PayPal, something human and messy and catchable. Instead, he opened the first account and stared at the screen long enough for the silence to become physical. 47 seconds, according to the vault's own log. And somewhere in that span, right there, in the dead air between arrogance and comprehension, something shifted. Because the thing Daniel handed over wasn't a pile of records. It was a doorway. By 3:12 p.m., Mallory had locked his office door. He told his assistant he was in review. That was lawyer code for do not disturb unless the building is on fire. The blinds were half drawn, late sunlight cutting his desk into hard angles. He scanned the QR code from the black card into his desktop authentication app, entered the credential string, and waited for the kind of dashboard he'd dismantled 100 times before. What opened instead was a minimalist interface, white background, black text, no branding. At the top, Archive Index. Beneath it, a vertical timeline stretching back 12 years. Year tabs. Clickable. He clicked the most recent year first. Instead of a checking account summary, he saw a parent entity name. Under it, subentities. LLCs. 2 domestic, 1 Delaware-registered holding company. A foundation. 3 foreign corporations with filings attached in PDF format, each bearing digital authentication seals from reputable accounting firms. Mallory frowned. He clicked into one of the LLCs. Inside were folders labeled royalties, distributions, audits, patents. He opened patents. 6 active filings. 3 granted. 2 pending. 1 licensed to a manufacturing firm in Germany. Each document embedded with USPTO references, timestamped, cross-linked to royalty agreements. Royalty income flowed not to Daniel personally, but to a holding entity. That holding entity then distributed funds into a trust. The trust's beneficiary? Not Daniel. Mallory leaned back slowly. He called in 2 associates. Young, sharp, hungry for blood. I want you to review this, he said, gesturing to the screen like he'd found a rare insect. They expected crypto wallets or Cayman Islands nonsense. What they saw instead was meticulous structure. Every entity formed years before the marriage started to crack. Annual compliance filings. Tax returns. Independent audit letters from firms whose names they recognized and respected. Is this legal? One associate asked, too quickly. Mallory didn't answer immediately. He clicked deeper. The trust documents were ironclad. Irrevocable. Established 8 years ago. Asset transfer dates aligned with patent grant dates. Not recent panic moves. Not reactive shielding. This was planning. Long form. Slow. They checked tax filings. Everything reported. Everything taxed where required. International income disclosed. Transfer pricing documentation attached. Footnotes referencing regulatory frameworks. There was no sloppiness. No late scrambling. No suspicious lump sum transfers in the months before divorce. The architecture predated the war. As the afternoon turned to evening, the office lights shifted from sunlit to fluorescent. Coffee cups accumulated. Mallory removed his jacket. His tie loosened by 1 precise inch. They followed money trails that ended in foundations, then looped into research grants. They traced dividend distributions that landed not in Daniel's name, but into layered holding vehicles. On paper, Daniel's personal income looked modest, contractor-level modest. The real weight lived elsewhere. Structured, partitioned, untouchable, without piercing entities that had been lawfully established long before Marissa hired Mallory. At 7:43 p.m., one associate whispered. She thought he was just a mid-tier contractor. Mallory finally spoke, voice lower now. He let her think that. He clicked into the earliest year available on the Vault timeline. Year 1. The first patent application filed. The first entity formed. The first trust seeded with nominal capital. It was almost elegant in its simplicity, like watching blueprints become a skyscraper, floor by floor, long before anyone else knew construction had begun. And then they found the audit letter from 5 years ago. Independent verification of asset separation and beneficial ownership. Signed. Stamped. Dated. Mallory stopped leaning back. He leaned forward. Because this wasn't concealment. This was insulation. Daniel didn't hide assets after the marriage soured. He had designed a financial ecosystem where his personal legal identity was the least interesting node in the network. The wealth was real, tangible, documented, substantial, and it did not sit in his name. Reaction, sigh, this is the moment most people miss. When someone hands you the keys without flinching, it's not confidence, it's architecture. Mallory walked in expecting to expose hidden cash. Instead, he discovered a 12-year blueprint built by a man who never assumed love was permanent. That's not panic money. That's premeditated structure. /reaction story. The associates began testing angles. What about piercing the corporate veil? One suggested. Mallory shook his head slowly. You pierce when there's commingling. Fraud. Alter ego behavior. He gestured to the screen. This is clean. He pulled up royalty statements from the German licensee. Payments routed to the holding company. From there, documented board resolutions authorizing reinvestment into a research subsidiary. Everything signed and archived years before Marissa ever mentioned dissatisfaction. He opened the trust beneficiary clause again. Daniel was not the primary beneficiary. The foundation was. The foundation funded educational initiatives and small manufacturing grants. Ironically, the type Marissa loved posting about on social media when she wanted to appear philanthropic. Mallory exhaled slowly. Arrogance drained first. Then irritation. Then something else settled in its place. Professional respect. He stared at the top of the Vault interface again. Archive index. This wasn't a desperate man scrambling to save half his bank account. This was engineered architecture, assembled piece by piece across a decade, anticipating a storm long before thunder ever sounded. And for the first time that day, Mallory wasn't thinking about how to attack. He was thinking about how to survive the case.
This is the moment most people miss. When someone hands you the keys without flinching, it's not confidence, it's architecture. Mallory walked in expecting to expose hidden cash. Instead, he discovered a 12-year blueprint built by a man who never assumed love was permanent. That's not panic money. That's premeditated structure.
Sigh, this is the moment most people miss. When someone hands you the keys without flinching, it's not confidence, it's architecture. Mallory walked in expecting to expose hidden cash. Instead, he discovered a 12-year blueprint built by a man who never assumed love was permanent. That's not panic money. That's premeditated structure. By the next morning, Mallory wasn't strutting into the office. He arrived early. No jacket. No theatrics. He printed nothing. There was no point. Everything lived in that vault, time-stamped and cross-referenced like a forensic exhibit built by someone who never planned to lose. At 9:07 a.m., Marissa walked into his office wearing confidence like perfume. She expected progress. Leverage. Headlines she could rehearse in her head. Well? She asked, dropping into the leather chair without being invited. How bad is it for him? Mallory didn't answer immediately. He rotated his monitor toward her. What exactly, he asked carefully, did you believe your husband did for a living? She blinked, thrown by the tone. He's a contractor. Industrial supply. Consulting. He always said it was boring. Mallory's jaw tightened by a millimeter. He holds 6 patents. 3 licensed internationally. He structured entities over a decade ago. Audited. Verified. And most of the income never touches him personally. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. Okay, so he's better at paperwork than I thought. That doesn't mean it's not marital property. Mallory leaned forward. It was seeded before your marriage. And segregated. She scoffed. Everything's marital if it grows during marriage. Not if the growth belongs to an irrevocable trust established prior to marital commingling, he replied. The word irrevocable landed heavier than she expected. Over the next 48 hours, the case moved upstairs. Senior partners reviewed the vault access. They didn't rush. They combed, cross-checked filings with international registries, verified corporate formation dates, pulled tax treaty references. At 2:14 p.m. on day 2, they found the document that shifted the room temperature again. A prenuptial agreement. Filed overseas. Not hidden. Not secret. Properly notarized in a European jurisdiction known for enforceability. Attached were certificates of independent counsel acknowledgement. Translation copies. Apostilles. Marissa's signature sat there in black ink, dated 11 years ago. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. I don't even remember signing that, she muttered. You signed before a notary, Mallory said evenly. You initialed every page. Her breathing changed. Faster now. He said it was just for the business. That it was standard. It was, Mallory replied quietly. And it was airtight. The senior partner closed the file and removed his glasses. This isn't concealment, he said to Mallory. This is separation by design. But Marissa wasn't done reaching. What about the lake house? She snapped. We bought that together. My family vacations there. My name's on the photos. They pulled the property records. The deed wasn't in Daniel's name. It wasn't in hers either. It belonged to a non-profit entity, one tied back, through clean filings, to the same foundation that appeared in the vault. The foundation's charter outlined retreat and educational initiatives. The lake house was categorized as a program asset. You don't own it, Mallory said flatly. Her face flushed. That's impossible. I decorated it. You were allowed to use it. That distinction cut deeper than accusation. They tried another angle, lifestyle evidence. Social media. Marissa's own posts flooded the screen. Curated vacations, captions about our home, hashtags celebrating our empire. But the metadata timestamps didn't help her. In fact, they hurt her. The filings showed structured dividend distributions funding her personal spending accounts technically categorized as discretionary allocations. Not joint operating funds. Not shared ownership. Every narrative she built publicly was cosmetic. Legally irrelevant. You're telling me I get nothing? She demanded, voice sharpening toward hysteria. I'm telling you, Mallory said carefully, that you have no direct ownership stake in the architecture. She stood abruptly. Architecture? It's money. It's ours. Mallory didn't correct her again. By hour 36, the tone in the firm shifted. Associates stopped using words like attack and started using words like exposure. The senior partner called in their risk assessment counsel, not because Daniel had done anything illegal, but because they needed to calculate how catastrophic a failed claim would look against such documented structure. At hour 42, they attempted to locate leverage in commingling. Joint accounts, minimal balances, personal property, depreciating assets, vehicles leased under corporate agreements. Even the luxury SUV she drove was titled under a distribution vehicle owned by one of the entities. At hour 48, Marissa stopped laughing. The confidence she wore in court had dissolved into something thinner, denial stitched together with indignation. He planned this, she said finally, eyes glossy but not from sadness. He built all of this, so I'd have nothing. Mallory looked at the vault timeline again. Year 1, Year 2, Year 3. The structures were established long before any divorce conversation, before her complaints, before her public flirting at industry events, before the marriage began to rot. He built it, Mallory replied quietly, so that if this ever happened, the system would already be in place. Her voice cracked, not from heartbreak, but from losing control. So what do we do? For the first time since filing the demand, Mallory didn't have a strategic answer. Because every door they tried to open led back to the same conclusion. Daniel wasn't hiding assets. He had engineered a life where ownership and access were two very different things. And Marissa, despite living inside the benefits for years, had never actually owned the foundation beneath her feet. By the end of the first week, the war had already burned itself out, and no one had even stepped in a trial. Mallory stayed late Thursday night. The office was mostly dark, city lights reflecting off the glass walls like a silent audience. The vault portal was still open on his monitor. He hadn't closed it all week. Not because he was digging anymore, but because he was trying to find a flaw. He called the managing partner at 8:26 p.m. Not from the conference room. Not from his desk. From behind a closed office door, blinds drawn. "I need 10 minutes, he said when the partner answered. He summarized the structure without embellishment. 12 years of entity layering. Patent royalties routed through holding companies. An irrevocable trust established before marital strain. Foreign filings verified. No commingling. No concealment. Audit trails cleaner than most Fortune 500 disclosures." Silence stretched on the other end. Finally, the partner asked, "Can you pierce it?" "No fraud. None. Hidden transfers pre-divorce. Everything predates conflict." There was a pause long enough to change careers in. Mallory lowered his voice. "I believe he built the system anticipating this scenario. Anticipating divorce." "Yes." Another silence. Then the managing partner said something Mallory didn't expect. "Then we're not litigating a separation. We're challenging an engineered structure designed to survive one." Mallory didn't disagree. At 9:04 p.m., the managing partner made the decision no litigator likes to make. Withdraw. The next morning, Marissa arrived expecting strategy updates. She got something else entirely. Mallory didn't sugarcoat it. "We're stepping down," he said evenly. Her laugh came fast, brittle, disbelieving. "Excuse me. We're withdrawing representation. You can't just quit because he has paperwork." "It's not paperwork," Mallory replied, voice measured. "It's architecture. And there is no viable legal path to dismantle it without exposing you to significant financial risk." Her face flushed a shade deeper than anger. Humiliation creeping in. "So you're scared of him?" Mallory didn't rise to it. "I'm respecting the structure. You told me we'd expose him. I believed we would. And now I believe you misunderstood who you married." That landed. Her composure fractured for a split second. "He's not some mastermind. He's just paranoid." Mallory gathered the black vault card from his desk and slid it back toward her across the polished surface. "You're free to retain new counsel. They'll need this." By noon, the formal withdrawal was filed. But Marissa wasn't finished swinging. She hired a second firm by Tuesday morning, a litigation boutique known for aggression. Different style. Louder. Younger partners who still enjoyed court theatrics. They logged into the vault at 1:17 p.m. By 2:02 p.m., the lead partner had already requested internal review. By 3:41 p.m., he'd called 2 outside tax specialists. By 4:18 p.m., the same phrase surfaced in a private office discussion. "This predates the marriage." At 5:09 p.m., Marissa received the call. "We can't take the case," the second firm said. She went very still. "Why not?" "Because you don't have standing to challenge most of these holdings. And attempting to do so would likely trigger defensive counters we strongly advise against." "What counters?" she demanded. "The kind backed by documentation." She hung up before they could elaborate. 2 firms. 2 withdrawals. Same vault. The aggression that started in courtroom 3B, the public accusation, the demand for everything, had dissolved into professional retreat. No subpoenas filed. No emergency motions. No media threats. Just silence. By the end of week 1, the battlefield had collapsed without a single shot fired in open court. Daniel never raised his voice. He never filed a counterclaim. He didn't posture. He simply handed over the door. And one by one, the people who walked through it decided they didn't want to stay inside. As the court date approached, something strange happened. Nothing. No emergency motions. No explosive filings. No dramatic accusations. Marissa's new attorney, a smaller solo practitioner willing to step in after 2 firms walked away, filed paperwork that felt thinner each time it hit the docket. Allegations without weight. Claims of marital contribution, unsupported by documentation. References to lifestyle standards with no direct ownership trail to attach them to. There were no joint brokerage accounts to dissect. No hidden transfers. No suspicious withdrawals. No co-signed property deeds. Every financial artery she tried to trace rerouted into structures she did not legally touch. Even subpoenas stalled. Several institutions tied to the trust entities responded through counsel within days, politely but firmly noting that the requesting party lacked standing. Everything relevant had already been disclosed through the vault. There was nothing further to produce. Behind the scenes, another quiet reality emerged. Some of the accounting firms tied to Daniel's entities were large enough and connected enough that no one wanted to publicly allege misconduct without evidence. The solo attorney advising Marissa discouraged any attempt at media pressure. You go public, he told her bluntly, and you risk defamation exposure. These structures are verified. The smear campaign she imagined never launched. And that's when she finally called him directly. Not through lawyers. Not through a mediator. She dialed his number at 9:38 p.m. on a Wednesday. He answered on the third ring. You planned this, she said without greeting. Her voice was tight, not crying, not yelling. Contained fury. You built all of it, so I'd have nothing. On the other end, Daniel was quiet long enough that she thought he might hang up. I built it, he said calmly. In case you ever became like the system attacking me. What does that even mean? She snapped. It means, he replied, I never believed institutions protect individuals. They protect structures. So I built one. She laughed sharply. You're unbelievable. You hid money from your own wife. I didn't hide it, he said evenly. You never asked what it actually was. Her breathing shifted. Don't twist this. I supported you. I was there. You were there, he agreed. You just weren't on the paperwork. Silence. Then she tried a different angle. You let me think you were just earning a salary. I was earning a salary, he said. The rest wasn't salary. That was the moment something finally cracked. Because over the last week, she'd been forced to read documents she'd never cared about before. She'd seen dividend distributions categorized as discretionary lifestyle allocations. She'd noticed how her monthly spending transfers came from a vehicle labeled personal distribution, not payroll. Her shopping accounts, her travel cards, the lake house maintenance budget. None of it came from his paycheck. It came from structured dividends routed through entities that had their own governance, their own beneficiaries, their own purpose. You funded my entire life through allowances, she said, the word tasting bitter. Through distributions, he corrected softly. Approved ones. I'm your wife. You were, he said. Another silence, heavier now. You set this up for me, she whispered, accusation draining into something closer to realization. No, he answered. I set it up for myself. Long before you started talking about finding yourself. Her voice wavered for the first time. Not theatrical. Not performative. I never knew, she admitted, almost to herself. I know, he replied. And that was the real collapse. Not the weak filings. Not the failed subpoenas. Not the firms walking away. It was the moment she understood that the man she dismissed as cautious, even boring, had been operating on a level she never bothered to examine. She had lived inside a system she mistook for simplicity. She thought the house was his salary. She thought the vacations were bonuses. She thought the investments were joint growth. She never saw the architecture beneath it all. As court loomed, her position wasn't just legally fragile, it was philosophically hollow. She couldn't claim contribution to structures she never participated in. She couldn't assert ownership over mechanisms she never questioned. For years, she underestimated the quiet man who didn't brag. Now, staring at the paperwork that defined her financial reality, she finally saw him clearly. And by then, it was too late to renegotiate the foundation. The mediation lasted 4 hours. No raised voices. No dramatic objections. Just a long conference table, filtered water, and a mediator who had clearly reviewed the vault access ahead of time. Marissa arrived with her solo attorney and a folder that looked thicker than it needed to be. Paper makes people feel armed. Daniel arrived with one legal pad and nothing else. The mediator began gently, outlining options, division of assets, potential spousal support, negotiation ranges. It all sounded procedural until the documents came out. Every time Marissa's attorney attempted to assert marital interest in a holding, the mediator would glance at the premarital formation dates and the irrevocable trust structure. No standing, he repeated more than once. The phrase stopped sounding legal and started sounding personal. They examined joint accounts. The balances were modest. They examined real property, the lake house, foundation owned, the primary residence, held by a separate entity under lease agreement. Vehicles, one leased corporate SUV, one personal sedan in Daniel's name. There was nothing to split that hadn't already been defined years ago. At one point, Marissa leaned forward, frustration breaking through her controlled posture. So that's it. He walks away with everything. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He waited until the mediator looked at him. I'm offering a clean break, he said calmly. No alimony. She keeps the car. Personal accounts remain as is. Marissa stared at him. That's generous of you. It's simple, he corrected. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably. He knew the alternative. Extended litigation against fortified entities. Mounting fees. No leverage. The mediator leaned back. Given the enforceability of the prenup and the asset separation confirmed, this offer is practical. Practical. The word tasted like defeat. There were no courtroom theatrics. No judge slamming a gavel. No public unraveling. Just signatures. Marissa signed last. Her hand trembled. Not dramatically. Not enough to call it a scene. Just enough to show the shift from anger to comprehension. She wasn't losing a fight. She was acknowledging one she never had the ability to win. Months later, at a formal industry fundraiser, Daniel crossed paths with Mallory again. Black tie, soft jazz, polished marble floors. The kind of environment where reputations are currency. Mallory approached him without hostility. "I sealed everything," he said quietly, almost conversational. "Archived copies. Closed our review." Daniel nodded. "I assumed you would." Mallory studied him for a moment, not adversarial now. Analytical. "That wasn't litigation," he admitted. "That was architecture." Daniel didn't smile. "It was planning." Mallory exhaled once, almost impressed despite himself. "You built it years ago." "Yes." "For this." "For the possibility," Daniel replied. There was no gloating, no victory speech, just acknowledgement of reality. Marissa wasn't present that evening. She had moved into a smaller apartment across town, kept the car, adjusted her lifestyle quietly. No public statements, no dramatic posts about resilience. The war she imagined never happened, because the outcome had already been decided long before the first demand for all financial records. Daniel never fought in court. He never counterpunched. He didn't need to. He designed a life where the system attacking him would find nothing to dismantle, because it had been intentionally separated from him years before conflict ever began. Some men argue, some men react, and some men build structures so carefully that by the time the fight arrives, it's already over.
That's the part people miss. This wasn't about crushing someone in court. It was about building a life that couldn't be crushed in the first place. No screaming matches. No dramatic verdict. Just preparation so thorough that every legal weapon turned into a rubber knife. When Mallory called it architecture, he wasn't exaggerating. He was admitting defeat in the most professional way possible. And whether you admire Daniel or question him, one truth stands. Some battles aren't won in the courtroom. They're won quietly, years before anyone realizes a war is coming.